place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, May 12th, 2025, and this is episode 1034 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it's a Monday show, so it's a Just Nicole show, and I just got back from Midwest Preparedness Project, which is the inspiration for today's topic, and what we're going to talk about today is filter or fire hose. When you're on your first date with somebody, should you just open the fire hose of all your weirdness and let them have it and see if it works? Or should you filter it a little bit? It's a really good question. It actually came up at Midwest Preparedness in the context of something else. So we're going to run through it both in the context of dating and in building community today. I welcome your feedback in the live comments of today's show. If you're on here live, if you have a comment to throw in along the way, write the word comment in all caps so I can see it. And if you want to ask a question by saying question colon and in all caps so I see it, and then ask your question. We're also going to talk about Tales from the Prepper Pantry and Operation Independence. And I believe I have a frugality tip in from Margot just under the line today. I was totally out. I was not going to put the segment in, and then she emailed me like 3 because she's good like that. Anyway, before we jump into that, our featured event of today's show is the Self-Reliance Festival, which is October 4th and 5th. And it's in Camden, Tennessee at Birdsong Marina. We've got Brooke Whipple. We've got Tag from Life Done Free. I will be speaking there. I haven't been announced yet, but spoiler alert, that's going to happen. A bunch of great people are going to be speaking. We've got a cool cheese demonstration coming up that's an add-on workshop during the event. Sonny Bazookas will be there. Come on out and learn about homesteading, building the life you choose, and preparedness all in one place for a good time at selfreliancefestival.com. Tickets are $95 until the first 100 tickets sell, and they're almost sold. So if you want to get that $95 price, man, get it now. That ticket is refundable until August minus processing fees. Just saying. They're not going to be any cheaper than this until, I don't even know if next round they'll even get down to $95. So check it out, selfreliancefestival.com. Also, I want to thank 2 sponsors. The first sponsor is Discount Mylar Bags. Toby over at Discount Mylar Bags has his secret sauce, if you will, is to identify things in bulk at a low price, divide them up, and pass on those savings to you. Check that out at discountmylarbags.com, not just for Mylar bags, but other food storage and preservation solutions. He's also got a wealth of information on thoughts on storing food, what size bags to use, how to match your O2 absorbers to that, and what makes sense for a packaging size for a family of 1, a family of 2, a family of 4, those sorts of things. Check it out, discountmylarbags.com. And then our second sponsor of today's show is somebody we've never had sponsor the show before. And I'll just admit it. I chose this sponsor because this deserves some special highlighting. And it comes from my friend, Jack Spirko of the Survival Podcast. You guys know who that is, right? Like, I talk to him from time to time. And today, something very special happened in Jack's life. He released his book, Laws of Life, Ditch the System, Design Your Life, which is a collection of his own laws of life that he's built over the years of building a successful life, both with his family and with his businesses. And he shares those with us. They are not, he'll say it in the book, this is by no means original to me. I've pulled them from different sources, but they're the things he does every day and the way he evaluates things. And he shares that very openly in this book. Very easy read, and it's great if you're in your 30s looking to, build something. If you're in the middle of building something, it's great if you're my age and, towards the tail end of building something, to go back and say, like, am I doing these things? Should I be doing these things? How can I do these things? But really, your 16 to 25-year-old who's just starting to figure out how they want to do life. Imagine if this book resonates with them, they start that early and build an awesome life. So it went on sale today at Amazon. You can check it out. Jack Spirko's Laws of Life, Ditch the System, Design Your Life. With that, it's time for the first segment of today's show, and that's Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And we had pantry road food, which went really well. Full confession, Ma Sauce and I did go out to eat 2 times while we were out of town over a 4.5 day period of time. The night we left, we stopped and grabbed some takeout. And one time on the way home, we, as a treat, grabbed a little bit of food. But other than that, we were able to live out of the cooler. And it worked great, especially the Scotch eggs left over from the spring workshop. We had some of those left over, surprisingly. And those were like a great, like just munch it straight up in the morning when you're driving, that sort of thing. We had stews and soups from the freezer. I had some cured meats to bring, and it all came together great. And that's both a way to help my operation independence where we don't spend too much money on stupid things like all the food out on a trip, but also it helps, stay true to the seasonal eating approach as well as eating as much healthy food and whole food as possible. So that was great. The pantry is actually working for me very well again, especially since putting it back together. Speaking of putting it back together, it is way easier to manage and find things and figure out what needs to be restocked now that my prepper pantry is put back together. And we're down to one last like final freezer reorganization where I take things I took off site for the workshop to make room for workshop catering food and put it back into the freezer in a way that makes sense. But it's now set up in a way that Tactical can come in, find what he needs, communicate with me if it's time to resupply, and I can just pop in there and kind of all in one place. Wherein for the last 9 months or so, it's been a little bit of chaos everywhere. And even before then, I couldn't really store certain things in the prepper pantry because it was needing to be waterproofed and some other things and rodent proofed. And so now I just have everything kind of in a logical place, and it makes a huge difference. I'm going to add that segment as well as ideas for storing in small spaces to the Power Pantry Method webinar series, training series, which will be rolling out an update in the next 12 months or so. It's we're going to do canning before we do the Prepper Pantry Method update. So getting more Swiss chard off the garden than we can eat. In fact, I think I need to go harvest more today, even though we're probably still eating on the last harvest, which I did Wednesday before I went out of town, right? And that's good. It's good to have that. I can preserve Swiss chard either by freeze drying it, or freezing it, and then use it in soups and stews in the winter if I want to. I don't tend to do that though. I like to just eat it fresh. I have some freeze dried already that is a couple years old that I could use if I wanted to. Therefore, there's no reason to throw this chard in the freezer. So what that means is it's worm food or giveaway food or sell it food. And one of the things Tactical and I are going to be talking about this week a lot and next week is how are we monetizing what we do on the homestead? That, like some things we've ignored, like maybe having a little farm stand at the base of the driveway or somewhere nearby where we can sell surplus. And I'm starting to have surplus. So we'll see how that goes. The cool thing is, like, we're way off the beaten path. But if I put a few signs up, I'm pretty sure people at the marina might be interested in some fresh food. And if not, it's not that much effort to try to do it. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And then I try something else. That's kind of how you get those things going. But all the people want to come here to buy duck eggs, for example, I can have them out and in a cooler and self-serve so that for that relatively small purchase, right? I don't have to stop everything I'm doing, go down, do a transaction, and then get back into what I'm doing on sort of the higher value work that I put in. Other than that, that's everything from the prepper pantry, actually. Frugality tip is next, and Margot forwarded me one she didn't think I'd read, and that's probably true. And so we're going to do it today, but she came up with a couple other really good ones. So we're starting to fill up the Frugality Tick bank account again. If you have a frugality you want to share also, send it to Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com or go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact, fill out the form. Those emails go to me and they go to the same inbox as the email I just said. So here's from Margot about, optimizing some of your plant budget if you are a gardener. She says, I do grow some plants from seed, but I buy plants too. This year, Walmart has a store brand of plant that's where starts are about $2.48, which is more than half the price of other name brands. The selection isn't large, but if you want to grow something without having to spend too much, this is a great option. Walmart also marks down plants on Tuesdays and Fridays. I go on Wednesdays. This week I got a pot with 2 jalapenos in it that are over 2 inches tall with flowers and it's probably 2 feet tall. 2 feet tall with flowers and peppers on them already for $4, marked down from $12. And a few weeks ago, I found some tomato starts for $1. So if you keep your eyes on those deals at Walmart, you can grab some of your garden plants for way cheaper than the $5 or $8 plants at Home Depot, for example. Next up, we have Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our lives here or avoiding the need to pay a guy. And this one's actually about maintenance. So a lot of times it's easy to evaluate what we're doing based on what's cheap, what's cheap, what's cheap. That's not the way we want to do it. We want to look for long-term value. And so this last week, gutters went in on my home, which since we redid the front roof line about 4 years ago, I've had a leaky gutter on the front of my house. Taj Mahal has had no gutters at all, which means all the water was coming down half of Taj Mahal, hitting my house roof, and then coming down my house roof and then leaking. And I have developed a bit of a water issue in one place in my house where I'm like, where is this coming from? Right. And so finally I was like, you know what, we got to do the gutters, because if there is a different leak that is being disguised by the fact that we have leaky gutters, then that's going to turn into a whole big expensive thing. And so the gutters are now on, and they are the seamless type, so they don't leak anywhere at seams. That's where gutters will leak if they're going to leak. And so we have a couple things going on. One, we're able to divert water where we want it. And long term, that we can tap into that for other things like flowing it through places where we want water retention on the property, possibly adding rain barrels. Don't know if that makes sense yet, because the way we have the topography of the land right now and where the water is flowing mostly, it kind of helps just keep the orchard watered and other things from natural means. And then I don't have to have a bunch of ugly tanks around. So that's one. Two, it unearthed that there is, in fact, a very small roof leak that was probably getting hammered harder than it normally would because of all the volume of water coming onto my house roof. And that means we can now track that down and reduce the water penetration issue in a home. Because in Tennessee, one of your big battles in home maintenance is to keep, like you're fighting the water in a couple of ways. Like you don't want it to freeze and break things. You don't want it to infiltrate and rot things. We have humidity. We have lots of rain that happens all at one time. And that's just a different, and then you have like the erosion caused if you don't route your water runoff correctly. So water is a real enemy here. But what I wanted to say is, as far as Operation Independence, is that's actually like putting the gutters on is avoiding a much bigger repair project that would have happened had we not seen the other leak that can now be fixed. So Tactical's out there this morning, like hanging off the side of the house when I walked out for coffee, and he's like, there's a leak. And I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And he's like, well, when it's dry, I'll see if I can get up there and figure out what's leaking, because I see an approximate area where I think it's coming from. And he's like, you got a Sharpie or something? So he marked on the roof where he's going to go back and look. And that's kind of the best way to find the leak. Is it's raining, you see the leak, you mark where the leak is, and then you don't climb on the slippery metal roof. You wait for it to dry and not be slippery, because we don't need to be stupid, right? But my house is already, like, that problem area is already less of a problem, I think, because with the gutters on Taj Mahal also, it's just like that took, I mean, it's a lot of water, right? I don't even know how many square feet it is, but it's 50% of my house roof of my whole house roof was dumping onto 50% of my actual house roof volume wise. And so it was a lot of water. Like it was so much, sometimes we were overflowing the gutters when it rained really hard. And that's an important thing about maintenance and prevention. Prevention really, it costs you a little bit now, but it saves you a whole lot more later, which is why my buddy Kevin Kerr over at Arrowhead 3 Consulting says, do hard things. If you do hard things now, you don't have to do harder things later. With that, it's time to talk about the main topic of today's show, which is filter or fire hose. And the question is, how much should you let loose on the first date? This is where this came from. I was at Midwest Preparedness Project and I had just arrived. I watched Bear give his presentation, which is all about how to structure your community so that you avoid the risk of getting actually harmed. So you kind of let people into your circle in layers. And somebody asked him the question, like, how much, I'm a weird dude, how much of my personality should I let out when I'm first getting to know people? And Bear was saying you have to treat people you bring into your tribe as sort of a dating situation where you get to know them a little bit at a time. And I was over there thinking, we're in a world now where people don't know how to court very well. They don't know how to date. They don't, like, it's all about, like, it's a lot more based in attraction and sex, and there's sort of like the instant gratification and the online system putting a layer between you and meeting somebody in person. And there's a lot of good things that can happen with those tools, and that you could meet people that you wouldn't otherwise meet. But also it's like too many options, or too easy to hide things that you don't want to hide, and then there you are in a relationship, and then the person's not the person you thought they were, right? So I was just like, as Bear was answering that question, I'm like, I really want to chime in here, but it's his presentation, so I'm going to shut up, because that's what you need to do when somebody else is presenting, is shut up and maybe talk about it later on your podcast. And so I made a mental note. I was like, I bet folks in this community who are single are kind of interested in this, because a lot of us have unusually intense personalities, especially as we get further down the rabbit trail of figuring out how permaculture is not only a way to design your land, but it's a way to design your life. It's a way to design communities. It's a way to structure society. And we nerd out on that, and then if we nerd out maybe too much in somebody else's direction, they think we're a kook, and maybe they're right. So I'm weird, and the guy who asked the question that was weird, and y'all are weird, and pretty much everybody in our community is weird, and I've actually haven't met a person who isn't weird. So I think that's the first thing to think about, is if you are you going to filter your weird, right? Dating these days from the outside looks like a lot of posturing and fake. And that seems like a sad thing to me, because that's how you set yourself up for ultimate disappointment, right? And so I stepped back a little bit in my head as I was thinking about this, and I'm kind of watching the single people at the event, wishing they could meet people, not quite knowing how, right? Margot says, we are all weird. Yep, we are all weird. Pick your weird, man. Pick your weird. Did that? Oh, I'm hitting the wrong thing. I was trying to show your comment. So I went back to, okay, so let's think about developing communities and strong communities and inner circles from sort of that dating standpoint. And do you filter yourself a little bit at first, or do you just open the fire hose? And I mean, obviously, when you're first getting to know people, maybe you don't tell them everything at once when you're trying to develop community or bring people into your community. And some people have higher tolerance for risk, so maybe you're the kind of person who you're like, you don't need to know where I live. Well, let's compare that to online dating. Hey, let's meet at a coffee shop. Nobody needs to know where the other person's house is. A coffee shop's really easy to ditch on. You can do that while you're building community too. But I was kind of thinking about, like, there's 5 elements of building community that are really important. And the first one is the 5 C's: create, contribute, connect, clarity, and compassion. And create is where you create the opportunities for people to get together and to find shared missions to do together. And Self-Reliance Festival is an ideal example of create, right? It's creating a place and a thing where people can go and then figure out where to go from there community wise. I considered Self-Reliance Festival that coffee date. Like, it's the top of the funnel. You come across people, you get to know them. Some of them decide to volunteer. You get to know those ones a little bit better. Maybe you have some speakers in who you know pretty well, and you're sharing an Airbnb. You get to know them a little bit better. But all of that can be done without anybody knowing where you live, what your phone number is, unless you give that up, right? And by being a catalyst for that and by creating that environment, you're starting the process of developing community. And your role in creating in something like Self-Reliance Festival, which already exists, might actually be that you create a posse of people who come there and you create your camping household or something at Self-Reliance Festival. So there's lots of room for community members to create. How does that work in dating? It's the same thing. If you create new things, if you pursue passions, if you go on that hiking trip or on that kayaking trip or get out and do the things you love, whether it's the comic shop or Self-Reliance Festival, you create an environment where you can run across people who are more likely to match your weird, right? So in that case, are you going to filter or fire hose? I see it all the time at Self-Reliance Festival where it's just like paranoid brain dump on somebody and they're like, "Ee!" and they hide. Okay. That requires some skills we'll talk about later as we get into that. And 30-day reviews, long time no see. Welcome to the live stream. Contribute. The second C of building community is to contribute. People want to find a partner and people want to find community. They want to find their tribe. They want to be around people who have shared values where they can have that sense of real community where we can depend on each other, we can trust each other, we've got each other's back. And when they find a community they're excited about, they get all up in your face sometimes because they're excited. Totally understandable. But the biggest mistake I see for people who get excited like that is that they ask a different question than the one you should ask first, which is how can I contribute to this community? What can I do for these people that's of value? And this requires you to let go of your vulnerability or your non-confidence in yourself and stop telling yourself the story that you don't have anything good to add, because you do. There's always something you can have, even if it's like Midwest Preparedness Project. I'm sort of in that community, but not really. They're in Kansas, but I know a lot of them, and some of them have turned into really good friends, right? Others are like seeing me for the first time. And during the event, I saw somebody speaking have a voice that was doing what my voice was doing after the spring workshop, which is not working. And I had traveled with Mullen that we picked, like Tactical picked it for me the day I left, so it would be as fresh as possible. And I had peppermint tea. I did not have ginger and honey, which I would usually add to that, but I was like, I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to go to my campsite. I'm going to make the woman a cup of tea. I'm going to hand it to her when there seems to be a good time. I'm not expecting anything in return. I'm just contributing this because as her presentation was going on, her voice was getting harder and harder to hear. And it was a good presentation. And it's like, I wanted people to hear that presentation. That's why they're there. It was all about food preservation methods. So I went down to the campsite, made the tea, brought it up in an extra cup I had, and then walked up. And rather than being in her face, like, you have to take this thing I made for you, I waited. Because she was presenting something. You don't just like walk up and be like rhinocerosy. And I waited, and then she asked a question I happened to know the answer to. So I raised my hand. I said, this is what happens when you put cheese in oil. And I handed her the tea. Because it was like a logical break for that. She goes, oh, is this tea? I'm like, yeah, it's peppermint and mullein. I think it'll help. And it did. Like immediately after she drank some, her voice did not come back. Her voice was better. It's one of the, like, it was not a miracle fix, but it was something she could sip on for the rest of her thing. And then at the end of her presentation, I came and gave her a refill for the rest of the tea. But I was just contributing to like the greater good by that because I thought people would want to hear her. That's what I mean by you don't have to have a special skill. You just need to observe and then think about, rather than big ways you can help, what are little ways that you can help. It's much like if you invite somebody into your home and say, gee, can I get you something to drink? Or, like, be welcoming. that sort of thing. Well, okay, so what's the corollary to contributing if you're starting to date somebody? It's the same thing. I think it can really put people off when they're talking to you as you're getting to know each other. And sometimes you confess that something's not the way you'd like it. If you try to fix the whole thing, big picture, like, gosh, I'm really having trouble with my budget, and you just pay off their house. I mean, that doesn't happen to anybody, but just pretend it did. Like, that would be too much. But, like, what could you do to help that person? Well, you could suggest the kind of dates where we go on picnics and don't spend a lot of money, which then reduces the pressure on the budget. You could go out to see financial planners, as part, I don't know, like anything like that. I don't know what that contributes, but the attitude to take when courting isn't what can I get from this person? I think it is, how do we work as a team and what can I contribute to them? And then observe if they're doing the same thing. 30-day review says I info dump and don't think before answering questions. Margot says I want to meet the person who pays off mortgages. Yeah, as I said, that's not real life. Then the third C of building community is to connect. So once you've found a place, either by going or by creating the opportunity, and you've found ways to lightly contribute in a not annoying way. What can I do? What can I do? Don't ever do this. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I, like, sometimes it's just not a good time. And if you keep asking, it's like, you're causing stress. Connect with people. Connecting with people involves investing time and really getting to know them and talking with your ears, mostly. I was talking to somebody at the last event who's like, here's how the conversation goes. We're talking, they say, where are you from? I say where they're from, and they either say something insulting to me about where I'm from, or they just don't know what else to say. And I was like, well, really what they're looking for is common ground. So rather than just answer the question, ask a question in return, or confess that, when I answer this question, people are kind of insulting to me and I like where I am. So I'm happy to answer it, but I'd really appreciate if you feel that way, that, you don't do that, and then answer the question and then end with your own question back to them. And I think that is where, when you go back to the courting thing, like, we've forgotten as a society how to court. You tell a story and then you ask a question, and then they tell a story and then they ask a question, and that back and forth and inquiry, and I call it talking with your ears, but also not being afraid to share something, is what needs to happen. So is that filter or is that fire hose? You have to decide. The fourth C of building community is clarity. And this one's the hardest one for people. This is something Bear hit on really well. He said, if you're upfront with somebody about them not being a good fit, it only hurts that one time. But if you sort of waffle around, it hurts over and over and over, and it hurts multiple people. So clarity is sharing your clarity when you have it, setting clear boundaries when boundaries are being infringed on, so that you don't end up in the thing where it's like, not a problem, not a problem, not a problem, explosion. And I think that's been the hardest lesson for me in building Living Free in Tennessee communities. When there is an actual problem, getting involved earlier than I'd like to get involved when I see it going on. And I used to just because there is a certain amount of, it will deal with itself in a larger community of people. But if it doesn't, then at some point somebody has to be the person who says the thing that's hard to say. And that's true in courting as well. Something, like, if it ain't going to work, don't keep going out to coffee. And then the last one is compassion. Nobody is perfect. Everybody is weird. And sometimes weird is annoying. And sometimes your most compatible weird person, their weird is annoying in a community or in that situation. And having compassion and giving people grace goes a long way, especially when it's the culture of your community to do that. So the question you need to ask when the weird is getting annoying or when something has happened is this because I'm in a bad mood today? Are they having a particularly difficult day? Or do they just, you know, just not fit? Some people just don't fit. You know, 30-day review says ghosting is not an option in 99% of the circumstances. Yeah, so ghosting's a thing that happens now where people just like disappear on you out of nowhere and don't say anything. That would be somebody who's afraid of conflict and they don't want to man up or woman up and say, this isn't working for me. Or it could also be somebody where something big happened and they just don't know how to say it. I'm guilty of doing this. I'm guilty of not answering things because it's hard to answer. And sometimes it takes me time. And when I realize I'm doing that, what I've started doing is just finally answering late and saying, I was overwhelmed and this is what's up. Right. And that works well in community as well as that. So let's go back on to the purpose of dating. So I'm going to bring this back to filter or fire hose. What is the purpose of dating? Tell me that in the comments. In your opinion, if you're kind of interested in somebody new, what is the purpose of going on a date, going out to coffee? Letty says peroxide and spraying with Bactine. I don't think that has to do with my actual question I just asked, but it did just pop up right after I asked that question. So that was kind of fun. So anyway, I think she's talking about her poison ivy. What is the purpose of dating? Like, why are you even tuning into the show to find out filter or fire hose in this thing? Pippinized says, haven't dated in decades, so I couldn't tell you what the purpose of dating is. Pippinized, when you were dating, why did you go on dates? It's actually a pretty simple question. And the answer, I'm telling you, there's one answer, right? Nope. Letty says, dating is getting to know someone. Margot says the purpose of dating is to see if you're compatible with someone, the same interests or not. To get to 30-day review says to get to know them and see if they would make a good partner and see if they would be good yin to your yang. Letty says, do you guys mesh similar interests and such? Finding your person to commit to doing the life with, as Homestead Glamour says. I'm pretty sure Homestead Glamour hasn't dated in a while too, except for she probably still dates her husband. So there is another school of thought on what dating is for, and it's hookup. It is my understanding that there's a whole group of people out there on the internet who get to know each other with the sole purpose of casual sex. So it's important to know people can have different goals in dating. I heard Joel Salatin call it courting over the weekend, and I was like, that's actually a very different thing. Courting is with the intention of finding your life partner, right? And he said dating, and then he corrected himself. And I was like, well, that's interesting that he's made that change because, again, I see younger generations not quite knowing how to do this romantic side of things. And I mean, people my age don't know how to do it either. The ones who are single like I am, we have no idea, right? Because the systems have all been broken. Like the culture has all been broken. And so then you're like, is this person just interested in me because they want to try to have sex with me? Or are they actually, and then if you ask them like outright, what do they say? Are they lying? Like there's a lot that's going on there that probably has always existed, but seems to be amplified by the digital age, which is interesting. So you need to know your purpose. Whether it's dating a person or courting a community connections, right? What is your purpose with this? Is it to find lifelong friends that you can, share resources with and have fun with and all of those things? Or is it that you just want a quick dopamine hit and to be, or get money from them by selling them your stuff? That's the other thing I see wrong in a lot of people when they go to communities. It's like they're just there to sell their stuff. Now, there is nothing wrong with mutually beneficial transactions and all of us prospering together. But if all you're looking to do is always sell, 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 and you're not bringing benefit, people start seeing that and they don't like it. Right. So, knowing your purpose and being able to assess through actions and words what the other community member or person's purpose is pretty darn important. And that's one where if you ask me filter or fire hose, I would just fire hose. Like, why waste time? Why waste time? If you're looking for a life partner, just be like, I'm looking for a life partner. So if you are looking for a good time, don't call me. Super easy. Nobody gets hurt in that situation unless somebody lies at that point. So Victory Garden says, I like the idea of having serious dates and doing the Jordan Peterson self-authoring program and you swap with them. I don't get it. I don't know what that is because I haven't really been following Jordan Peterson that much. So really the big question of today's show is filter or fire hose. Should you go into a dating or community situation filtering your weird? I talked to Tactical about this morning. He's like, it depends. And I was like, I don't think it does. I think, why not both? Because there's an honesty issue. If you filter too much, then people get to know fake you. And then real you shows up to the table at some point, and that's a problem. Because they like fake you, not real you, or you get stuck as fake you. And that's no good either. So while I don't recommend opening the fire hose all the way, I recommend if you're going to filter that the way you filter is by letting actual fire hose things out and not some other random thing you made up. And, a lot of times I guess I would say it's like, don't mask, but maybe don't let everything out at one time on the first date. That being said, I've had some courting style dates years ago where we talked for 8 hours and talked about everything. Some of the most amazing connections I ever had, right? It also realized that I was never going to be with that person because of what they shared, right? And that was good because we could have actually had a really good time dating for a year, gotten married, gotten into the marriage, and I would have uncovered this core fundamental philosophical flaw that was going to be kind of a deal breaker for me. Not just it was a deal breaker. And, and that person has gone on to find their person, right? I was not their person. We were compatible in every other way, but it was like literally an ethical issue for me. And at the time, I didn't really realize it until later. And then, you had to have that uncomfortable conversation, right? So, that's the thing. So why not both? But what I mean by that is your weird factor is in the fire hose, and when you open the fire hose a little bit, you let your real weird out, and you don't like make up things. You don't tell other stories than the real stories, and then learn social cues. The way you know how much fire hose to let out is to watch the other person. And if you're one of those people who can't read social cues, yes, you can. When somebody's folding their arms and backing up from you, that means that they're ready for you to stop sharing your weird. Usually. There may be any reason for it. Maybe because your weird is weirder than their weird. Or it could simply be that their mom's in the hospital and they just can't process what you're saying right now, right? It could be any number of things. But if you quote unquote can't read social cues, start learning to read social cues. And if you can't really read a specific person's social cues and you realize in hindsight what was up, it's perfectly fine to go back and say, I'm sorry, I realized that I might have made you uncomfortable. Please accept my apology. And then know that they are not your person and there's no reason to continue to share your weird with them. These sort of, they're not it, right? Be willing to directly communicate. And this is hard for some people. Like I watched somebody at the event, they needed to go ask somebody a question. And I was like, this is the question you need to ask the person. And he was like, points to a friend, you need to go ask that question because he didn't feel confident enough to ask a question to a person he didn't know very well. That's a comfort zone thing. And that is like, I read this book once that one of the tricks to becoming a successful salesman, they tell you to go out to a mall. This is back when malls exist. I mean, maybe they still exist, as a man, and come back with at least the phone numbers of at least 3 women. And what that meant is you had to ask, get to know, like talk to a bunch of strange women until you got phone numbers, whether they were fake numbers or not. You never have to call the number. The purpose of it was to get you over that hesitation to ask strangers questions, right? Margot says some people will never be able to read cues, and that's something I need to be more compassionate with. That is also true when you are like giving the cues and you're like, why is this person not getting it? Well, again, I'm going to end up in that situation. I'm a hindsight person. I'll be like, wow, that was really uncomfortable. Why was that so? Oh, because they weren't reading my cues. Oh, that's probably a person that doesn't do so well with cues. And I'm going to try direct communication next time and just say the thing. And then sometimes I run it through my Jenny Hill filter where I'm like, Jenny, I need to say this thing to this person if they do this again. And this is the way I think I'm going to say it. And she usually has a nicer way to say it than I do. Like a close talker. That's a good one. If you are a close talker, which means you're standing closer to me than I can reach out and touch you and talking in my face, I'm going to take a step back. And if you take a step forward, I'm going to take another step back. And eventually, I'm going to figure out a way to end that conversation and get out of it because you were standing too physically close to me. That's it. You're not reading my social cue, which is to step back. And some people are just close talkers. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. Sometimes, well, it's always a cultural thing, basically. Sometimes they're clueless. Sometimes they're doing it to try to manipulate me. It doesn't matter. The other thing I can say is like, hey, can you step back? I've done that. And people are like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like I literally can't see you when you're standing that close to me. So don't stand that close to me. Probably their best breath stinks true. So there's that. But yeah, anyway, it's if you can't do social cues, try. Just try. Because there are some basic things that you can, in fact, learn. So Carrie says, I have a real hard time picking up on sarcasm. I tend to take people at face value. So you know that about yourself. And so I don't know how we're friends because I'm the most sarcastic person in the world, but here we are. Somehow I haven't totally pissed you off. That's good. But then admit it. Like when somebody's sarcastic to you, Carrie, and you don't get it. And then later you're like, oh, wait, they didn't mean that. You can be like, guess what happened? You were sarcastic and I didn't get it. And now I just got it. Was that sarcasm? That's what I mean by clarity. Be clear. You want to do that. You want to ask the hard things or say the hard things. And the most important thing is you are the story you tell yourself. So if you're not good at reading social cues and you keep telling yourself how bad you are at reading social cues, you will continue to be bad at reading social cues. Right? And here's what I know about me. I'm pretty good at reading a room or reading a group. And I am less good at reading one-on-one social cues sometimes, especially if there's a lot of subtext. So you're saying one thing, but you mean something else, and your body's telling me that, and some of your actions are telling me that, but you're telling me that this thing, whatever, you want to do this thing. I just believe you want to do the thing, because why would you lie to me? And that's something I've come to realize where in certain like business dealings, I have made the mistake of believing that what the person told me was what the person actually meant. And they just didn't know how to tell me whatever else, or maybe they didn't even know it themselves. And other people like John Willis can size up a person like that and be like, this is blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and usually it's true. Like I'll find out months later, wow, he was absolutely 100% about that. So what I've done is I've started learning more about some of the subtext body language, but also when I know somebody in our community, like John Willis, is really good at that, and I hear him sum something up, I pay attention to it, right? I pay attention to it. Yeah, Homestead Glamour. Don't stand so close to me. That should be like on a shirt that I wear. Don't stand so close to me. Nobody did that at Midwest Preparedness. So apparently in Kansas, y'all have enough space that you don't get all up in people's faces. So if you're going to be the story you tell yourself and you hear yourself defining yourself as something you wish you weren't, start reframing that into something you can be. Like, I'm always going to be who I am. Like, my skin color is the color that it is. So I'm not going to define myself as something that's not my skin color, for example. But if I say I'm bad at learning names and I keep telling myself I'm bad at learning names, I'm never going to be good at learning names. So what I tell myself is I'm getting better at learning names, because then I put more effort into remembering people's names. And for years, I just told myself I couldn't do it and I was bad at it. Yeah. That's the thing. That's what I mean by you are the story you tell yourself. So tell yourself a good one. When you fall into, or other people fall into, Eeyore syndrome, that has a very negative impact. So if your Firehose is Eeyore, go back to the previous point, figure out what story you need to tell yourself to stop being Eeyore all the time. If you're just like complain, and all I do is complain and everything's not right and everybody's stupid and blah, 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 you're the problem. They're not the problem. The universe is not the problem. The weather is not the problem. The job loss is not the problem. The person being an F-tard is not the problem. You're the problem. It's your reaction to the things that are happening. So I look at it this way, and this is true in dating or in community. We have doers, we have neutral people, and we have takers. And if you're courting and you're a doer, you need to find another doer. If you're looking for community and you're a doer, you need to find communities of doers, because the communities that fail the most end up with the takers taking from the doers getting PO'd, leaving, and then you just have a community of takers, and then it melts down and you have Eeyore syndrome usually. The whole thing, though, is a journey and not a destination. So when I ask filter or Firehose, I'm all in on Firehose. But I'm in on opening the valve a little bit at a time as it makes sense, because as you develop rapport and connection and interaction and trust, you can open the fire hose a little bit more. But if you just come in with the fire hose in my face, you actually knock me off my feet, and then I don't even know what just happened there, right? So it's sort of a little bit of both, but it's also a journey, and you have to understand your weird changes over time. Your whole life, your weird changes over time. And I really, I've come to think that in marriage, you have to be willing to stay with the person as your weird changes over time for both of you, or it's not going to work, right? You see so many people, it's like when we were 20, we were this way, but now that we're 50, we're that way, sort of thing. On the other hand, Joel asked an interesting question this weekend, like, what was your 10-year-old self? That's who you really are. And I was like, that's interesting. Who is your 10-year-old self? Is that coming out in your fire hose or not? Lots of good questions to ask, right? So I think the digital impact on dating has been both good and hard, in that it's easier to fake it till you make it in that situation. And if your real goal in the relationship is get married and have kids, and you don't care if you're compatible with the person or not, which is a terrible way to do this, by the way, guys, the digital world can really set that up. And you may get what you want, and it may not be what you want. In-person communication remains to this day the only way I know how to really get to know people. Like, I do get to know people digitally, but until we're in person, we don't know. And even better, in person and have gone through some difficult things together. Then you really know what they're made of, right? And I think sussing out shared values should always be your goal in community or in dating. Shared priorities do our priorities align? And long-term vision. Even though long-term vision adjusts over time, what does that all look like? So filter or fire hose, in my opinion, why not both? With that, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollerroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member. Head over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more about that. With that, guys, go out Get your fire hose ready. Make it a great day.